Alright, I'm sorry that my last video was cut off abruptly, but we're just going to pick up where we left off. So again, we were talking about the STAAR test, and right now we're talking about, we talk about what the STAAR test says, what our results are, and then how the test is broken up. So right now we're specifically talking about category 2. So category 2 again is talking about literary text. So again, the fiction, nonfiction, poetry, drama, um, and specifically with nonfiction, literary nonfiction. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Next slide. Category 3 in the STAR test for reading. Again, whenever I mention the STAR test, I don't know if I mentioned this in my last video, I believe I didn't, but whenever I just say the STAR test, I'm not talking about every STAR test your student takes. I'm specifically talking about 5th grade reading STAR test. Okay, so category 3 is understanding and analyzing of informational text. This is the things that they're specifically testing your students on is can they comprehend informational text? Can they summarize informational text? Can they find text evidence of informational text? And can they give you the characteristics of the informational text? So being able to say this is an argumentative essay because of blank. This is um, this is a expository because of blank. So being able to answer that. And also going back to how the test is broken up, out of those 38 questions, they're all multiple choice, and they give you the students 4 options. So that's every of the 38 questions in the 5th grade reading STAR, all multiple choice. So we're not having fill in the blank, they're not writing an essay, they're specifically just answering the questions. So what were our strengths and our weaknesses last year? So if you look at our results, you'll see that our strength last year was understanding across genres. So understanding and analyzing across all the genres. Now this means that they remember going back to video 1, they understand the vocabulary of reading, and they understand how to do text to self, and text to world connections. Where we struggled last year, where those students struggled, where all our students struggled, was our weakness was understanding and analyzing of literary text. This was category 2 in our STAR test. And again, this is the fiction, literary nonfiction, so like autobiography, poetry, and drama. What does this tell us? Our kids know the vocabulary reading. That's what our strength was. What our kids are not understanding is how to apply their comprehension and how to tell one text from a different text. How can they understand what a fiction text looks like? What does it look? What does a fable, or what makes the difference between a fable and a fairy tale? That's where our students were struggling last year. Being able to summarize, being able to tell us the plot of the story, being able to tell us the main characters, things along those lines is where our students were struggling last year. So what does this look like in our classroom? What this is saying is that we focused very well on the takes that we're covering, or the standards that we're covering over vocabulary. Those were takes that our students understand without us having to over-explain it. And these takes, so the takes, we have takes for every subject. So math has its own takes, science has its own takes, so on and so on. But English has both reading takes and writing takes. So specifically, the English takes that we are going over, or the reading standards that we are going over in the STAAR test, the reading STAAR test, is take 3, take 6, take 7, take 8, take 9, and take 10. That means nothing to you. I understand that. What this is saying is that we, out of all the standards of English, and there's 13, I believe, standards, probably more. Don't copy me on that. I'll give you an exact number at a later date. But we have a lot of standards for English. Out of those standards, these are the standards that the STAAR test is testing over. And our students understand Take 3 very well, and our students understand Take 6 very well. To some extent. Take 6, each one of these are broken up into at minimum 4, at maximum 6, 7 parts. So there are some parts that they understand great, and there's some parts that they don't understand. So that's what it looks like. So each one of these accumulates to a couple questions on the STAAR test. So what are we going to do in our classrooms to better your students on the STAAR test next year? How are we going to learn from last year's students so that we do not make those same mistakes? And what strategies are we going to incorporate? So the first strategy that we incorporated this year was a classroom library. Each class has libraries of books of all different genres, from fiction, fairy tale, folk, poetry, drama, like every type of book that there are, every type of story that they're going to incorporate in the STAAR test. We have books that have those storylines. Now, why do we have so many different books? Because your interests aren't my interests. And the same thing goes for students. I can pull out a book and half my class is going to like it, half my class isn't going to like it. Yes, it's a good book, but that doesn't matter when it comes to a student, whether it's a good book or not. So having a variety of books. The next thing we're going to do is have conversations daily about the different types of text, talking about how we're going to comprehend text, talking about what the exact things that they're covering in the STAAR, the comprehension, the author's purpose, all of that. We're going to have daily conversations about them in our classroom, specifically in my classroom as a reading teacher. The next thing is that we're going to have book clubs and literary circles. I'm going to be grouping like students together, reading like books so that we can dig in depth about specific books. And we're going to have response journals that each day I'm expecting the students to write what was the author's purpose, or being able to summarize the author's purpose. So we are going to do a lot with books this year. And what does that mean? Well, that means students are going to be reading a lot more. So what can you do as the caretaker? We are sending kids home with books. We want you guys to incorporate 15 minutes of reading, not 5 minutes, 15 minutes of reading a day. This can look like any type of book. We are not limiting students to only chapter books. I feel like that was something that a lot of people were pushing last year was, well, they're fifth graders. They have to read fifth grade books. They have to read these books. We're not looking at that this time. We're strictly looking at, are they reading? Because reading students, once they read the text, they're able to break down the text. You can't break down a text that you haven't read. So it can be 15 minutes of picture books. It can be 15 minutes of chapter books. It can be 15 minutes of graphic novels. It can be 15 minutes of reading independently. It can be 15 minutes of reading as a family. It can be 15 minutes of reading to a younger sibling. We want 15 minutes. That's what we're expecting. And then having them, we are going to be sending your students home with logs, with reading logs, but they're not your traditional, what was the title, how much time did you read, date. That doesn't show us that your students are reading. I mean, that's so easy to just like write a time and numbers and stuff like that. We're sending your students home with reading logs that has them practicing these concepts of summarizing, finding the author's purpose, finding the theme of the book. We're having our students do these practices in school, but also at home for a minimum of 15 minutes. And like I said, we're doing both chapter. It can be both physical books and audiobooks, because reading, at the end of it, it's not if they're able to read the text, because our students are able to understand the vocabulary. We are looking at, can they summarize, can they find the author's purpose? So yes, even audiobooks, even graphic novels, all of that is appropriate for for y'all. So that is it on our presentation of the STAAR test. Again, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any concerns, please email me and I'll be glad to answer them. But thank you for coming, and thank you for having concern about the STAAR test this year. And have a good night. Bye.